I had this dream of being a writer. I got rejected by not one, not two, but 32 different publishers. It told me something. It took me 7 years to wake up to that fact, but I realized here I am. I'm 7 years older now. It's 1989, and I really want to write, and I'm still trying to do it. So what does that tell me? So I actually stayed up most of the night talking with my wife, and we made a decision, and I walked in the next day, and which was my annual partners meeting of the business that I was now president of, and had the fun of shocking them all and saying, I am going to resign today as president of this deal, just when the numbers were starting to look good, and go back to Colorado where I grew up and see if I can write a book or two, because I really have to. They thought it was so nuts, that the senior partner who was the lead investor in the firm and had hired me, he came up to me sheet-weight, he was shaking, and he pulled out of his pocket a beat-up business card, put it in my hand, and he said, Tom, this is my therapist. You've got to call him right now. And I'm sure he was checking the windows to make sure I didn't jump out of one of these windows. Well, the point is that since that moment, I haven't had 1 millisecond of looking back. That was 18 years and 24 books ago. And that next book, the next book I wrote was accepted the first try. And so that's a long way around to say my experience is just one guy's experience, but every writer at some point has to confront that yearning to tell a story with the realities out there. And even if those realities slap you back once, twice, 32 times, if this is in your heart to do, you really have to do it. That's the trick about writing, is that if you have an idea, you really have to follow it wherever it leads, even if it's a big project, because writing may be the hardest work any of us will ever do, but it's also the most joyous labor we can ever be part of. Because when you create a story, an idea, a character, or two or three that reach other people, that bind us all, that connect us in this great and very isolated existence that we have, there's something so beautiful in that. I'm constantly moved by that, how stories travel and reach people. They're almost like little boats. And you spend a lot of time in solitary labor crafting this boat, you know, polishing the hull, making it seaworthy, outfitting the sails, rigging it up, and then you let it sail off and you never know where it might go. And it's a very beautiful thing when you find that those boats travel very far, much farther than you ever expected. And what I love about fantasy is that in creating that world, you can go at it from the standpoint of a big idea or a big question. You want to think about, maybe it's a question of what does it really mean to be mortal and alive and have a brief little life? And is there any meaning to that? Or a question like, what difference can one life make? Or a question like, how are we all connected in some various ways? That's the book, The Ancient One, set right here in the Pacific Northwest. That's about that question. I tried to build every single, in that magical world of Lost Crater, I tried to build every possible connection to species, across gender, across time, across cultures, and that's really what the story's about. But in thinking about that question, I've often thought that fantasy is like looking in a mirror, but it's a bent mirror. It's a mirror that is bent so that it emphasizes certain qualities and diminishes others. And that gives us a chance to really look close without being totally terrified. And so in that world, you can raise the profile of certain questions. The Great Tree of Avalon, for example, is really an environmental parable. And so every chance I could bend the mirror to talk about or look at that kind of question, that's what I do. And other issues are diminished because of that. For me, it's always helpful to begin with making a map. I do a map even before
physical map of the world.
A physical map of the world. Now, maybe it's my background as a wandering wilderness guide in Colorado, turned nature writer, turned fantasy writer, but I also, I know that in doing the map, I'm accessing both sides of my brain, and I'm helping to bring a place alive so that places especially in fantasy novels, especially in imaginary worlds, must feel every bit as real and true as the world we live in right here. If you like to go walking outside your home into a park and you feel the soft grass and you smell something on the breeze and you feel the sun on your face, you need to have that experience about an imaginary world. And so to me, in fact, the place of a story, especially in a mythic world, is a kind of character. It's not just a backdrop, it's a form of character, and it has all the mood swings and all the bizarre qualities and all the changeability that a human character has. Some people say, gee whiz, wasn't that scary to leave a paying job and all that and change cities? And of course, it's always scary to change anything in life. Cities, jobs, whatever, but the much, much, much more scary thought was the idea of growing old and being 80 or 90 years old someplace on my front porch in my rocking chair and thinking, life has gone by and I've been a moderately successful whatever shoe salesman, and how could I possibly have not tried to do what was really in my heart? My life is gone and I've blown it. I've missed that whole opportunity to be, or at least to find out if I could possibly really be a writer, and just because I lacked the courage. That is a really frightening thought. So follow your passion is really what it comes down to. Beyond all that, every other bit of advice I could have is just technicalities. And there are some important technicalities, like train yourself to notice, to be a great observer in all your senses, or practice every chance you can. But the real thing is to do it and find a way. And you will find your voice.